In the early 1970s, Japanese cars were something close to a joke in America. Small, strange, and easy to dismiss. 2 decades later, they were being built in Ohio by American workers, outselling the giants that had laughed at them. And here is the strange part. They did not win by beating Detroit at its own game. They won by playing a completely different one, and by using an idea that America had invented and then ignored. To see how big the shift was, picture the American car market before it happened. 3 companies, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, utterly dominated. Fuel was cheap, roads were wide, and the cars reflected that. Big, heavy, powerful, and thirsty. Imported cars existed, but they were a curiosity, a rounding error in the sales charts. The idea that a small Japanese company might one day outsell Detroit in its own backyard would have sounded absurd. And then, almost overnight, the ground shifted. In 1973, the oil embargo hit, and fuel prices exploded. Suddenly, the defining feature of an American car, its enormous thirsty engine, became its biggest liability. Many American cars of the era struggled to manage 15 miles per gallon. The Japanese compacts arriving on those same shores, cars like the Honda Civic and the Toyota Corolla, were delivering somewhere between 25 and 35. They were light, they were small, and their engines had been designed under completely different pressures. In a country where fuel had always been expensive and space had always been tight. What had looked like a weakness became, in a single winter, an overwhelming advantage. Over that decade, Japanese imports climbed from under 18% of American car sales to roughly 28%. But fuel economy alone does not explain what happened next. Cheap fuel eventually returned and the Japanese share kept climbing anyway, because the real advantage was never really the cars. It was the way they were built. And the roots of that advantage trace back, remarkably, to an American who Detroit refused to listen to. His name was W. Edwards Deming, an American statistician. In 1950, he was invited to Japan, to an industry still rebuilding from the devastation of war. He taught Japanese engineers and executives a set of ideas that sounded almost too simple. Measure everything. Hunt down the causes of defects rather than inspecting them out at the end. Improve constantly. And above all, build it right the first time, because catching a fault early is vastly cheaper than fixing it later. Japan listened intensely. American manufacturers, riding high and selling everything they could build, largely did not. One of the great ironies in industrial history is that the quality revolution that would eventually humble Detroit was seeded by an American in a Japanese conference room, decades before anyone in Michigan took it seriously. Toyota took those ideas and built an entire manufacturing philosophy around them, now known worldwide as the Toyota production system. 2 pillars held it up. The first was just-in-time production. Rather than stockpiling mountains of expensive parts, you build only what is needed, exactly when it is needed. That sounds like a simple inventory trick, but it has a brutal side effect. With no cushion of spare parts, any problem stops everything, which means problems can never be quietly ignored. They must be found and fixed at the source. The second pillar was the principle that a machine or a person should stop immediately when something goes wrong, rather than pushing defective work further down the line. That principle produced one of the most striking objects in modern industry, the andon cord. A line running along the assembly line that any worker at any level could pull to halt production the moment they spotted a defect. Think about how radical that is. An ordinary worker on their first week holding the power to stop a factory producing thousands of cars. In many rival plants, the unspoken rule was the opposite. Keep the line moving at all costs, and let the problems be sorted out later in a rework area. Toyota decided that the person closest to the work was the first line of quality defense, and gave them real authority. That is Deming's argument turned into a physical piece of rope. Alongside it came Kaizen, the practice of continuous improvement. Not sweeping reinventions handed down from executives, but a steady drumbeat of small refinements suggested by the people actually doing the job. Workers met in small groups to discuss what was going wrong and how to make it better, and their suggestions were genuinely implemented. Any single change might save a few seconds or eliminate one rare defect. But repeated across thousands of workers over decades, those tiny improvements compounded into an enormous gap that competitors found almost impossible to close. It was not one brilliant idea. It was 10,000 small ones stacked. Customers understood none of this, and they did not need to. What they experienced was much simpler. The cars just did not break. They started every morning, they ran for years, and the things that were supposed to work kept working. In an era when buyers had grown quietly used to new cars arriving with faults, that reliability was startling. And reliability, once established, becomes self-reinforcing. It sells the next car, it holds resale value, and it converts owners into advocates. Within a decade, Japanese brands had built something far more durable than any single model: a reputation. By the early 1980s, Detroit was losing badly, and pressure grew for political protection. The result was an agreement beginning in 1981 that capped how many cars Japanese manufacturers could export into the United States. On paper, it was a victory for American industry. In practice, it was one of the most spectacular own goals in economic history because of one detail. The cap applied to cars shipped from Japan. It did not apply to cars built inside the United States. So the Japanese manufacturers simply came and built. Honda opened its plant in Marysville, Ohio, and the others followed, until Nissan, Toyota, Mazda, and Mitsubishi were all producing cars on American soil. By the early 1990s, the number of Japanese-branded cars built in America overtook the number shipped in from Japan. Decades later, the large majority of Japanese-brand vehicles sold in America are made in America. The restriction designed to keep them out had instead pushed them to put down permanent roots, with American factories, American workers, American suppliers, and crucially, American political constituencies of their own. The wall did not stop them, it naturalized them. So how did Japanese cars take over the world? Not by inventing a magical engine and not really by luck with an oil crisis, though the timing certainly helped. They won because they treated the factory itself as the product worth perfecting. Detroit was building cars. Toyota was building a system that built cars, and then relentlessly improving that system one small fix at a time for decades. The final irony is that almost none of this was secret. The Toyota production system has been studied, published, and copied around the world for half a century. The ideas were always available. What was hard and what remains hard was the patience to apply them every single day, long before anyone could see the results. Subscribe for more of the hidden history behind the machines that shape the world around you.